episode 20 of the Lightning Round. I'm your host, Lightning.
I'm your co-host, Rashi.
To start off, we got a couple of announcements this week. First of all, we have an announcement that Silent Ponyville, that's been going up on my channel, has finally been completed. We have all the chapters, including the epilogue, and that was posted up on EQD a couple days ago, and it's been met with quite a bit of popularity, so I'm really happy about that. And if you haven't seen it yet, definitely give that a look at, because I think it turned out extremely well. The next thing is about the auditions for On a Cross and Arrow, which we're going to be doing in about a month or so. And the auditions for that were supposed to be done by the 27th of October, but because of the number that I've been getting, I'm going to cut the auditions short a little bit, and I'm going to start casting the parts on the 20th as opposed to the 27th. So I'm going to move the deadline to a week earlier so we can get started with that. So if you're still waiting for auditioning, get those parts in because they're going to be closing on the 20th as opposed to the 27th. As for interviews, this week we have an interview with Penstroke, the author of Past Sins. That'll be coming up in a couple minutes. And next week we have an interview with Robot Butterfly, and she'll be talking about the various projects that she's in and a little bit about being a voice actor in general. So with that, we'll head into our interview for this week with Penstroke. Alright, first up this week we have our interview with Penstroke, the writer of Past Sins.
Hello.
So, why don't you first start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you became a brony?
Well, a little about myself is that I'm currently a master's student. We'll be finishing my degree this semester, actually, so graduating in December with a master's in computer science. Currently in the lovely Los Angeles city, so I keep my door dead-bolted at night all times. Beyond that, what got me into the brony community was during the graduate senior year, bunch of people on a programming team I was working on for a project were into the show. They kind of got me pulled in. I didn't really sink neck deep into the community, though, until I met a online writing buddy of mine, who everyone now knows as Batty Glue, on an off chance. And then we kind of sunk down into the community together again. So it was kind of that wonderful moment of cosmic coincidence where I ran into a writing buddy again. So got to enjoy that.
All right, so favorite pony and favorite episode?
Well, favorite pony, I always answer this question on 2 points. First, if we look primarily at main cast, I'm a big fan of Applejack. But then if we look to background and secondary ponies, I am a fan of Zecora. You gotta love characters who are written as rhymers. It just tickles my fancy. As to favorite episode, I have no clue whatsoever. I have no clue. I like them all generally on the same level. It's all just wonderful for the most part.
So, what got you into writing in the first place?
Oh, you're making me think back on that one. I started writing. High school was when I really started taking creative writing as an outlet for creativity, whatnot, stress relief. All the things you usually do when you have a hobby. Started off with fan fiction in a few fandoms I'm not ever going to divulge. And then after that, I toyed around with a few original concepts, ended up writing a few things that are full-length novels that have not seen the light of day beyond a few people reading in town. And then after high school and most of my undergraduate, it kind of just fell off because I got wrapped up in my programming and homework, schoolwork, all the stuff that usually starts eating up your time in university. And I just can't really say what really got me into it. It's just kind of that urge to tell a story based on something else that someone else had done, because I could see another story being told from that. So.
All right, so in this fandom, when it comes to writing, there are several different genres. Do you have any that you prefer over others?
Generally, I just don't like getting too much into... I can't really say there's one I prefer over another. I've written in a lot of different of the genres. I've done comedy stories. I've done crossovers. Started with crossovers, actually. I've done stories that had touched on a lot of different things. Dark, dark to a degree. I don't like to get overly gory at any point, so I may say someone is dead and maybe describe their corpse, but I won't actually describe the act, and I won't ever get into real details on that. That, and I've not done a shipping story yet, but that's the way some people talk. It's like, oh, it's inevitable, just give it to us. Come on. But yeah, I just generally whatever's striking my fancy at the moment is what I'll write. Like, because of the fact that it's around Halloween now, I've got that horror bug in my britches, so I'm working on something that's a little bit more on the scary side.
So, are there any authors that you get inspiration from or look up to?
In the community, there's a bunch that I've been able to talk to and gained some acquaintance with thanks to a Skype chat or two. I generally look up to all of them just because everybody is doing all their writing for the simple enjoyment of it, and you gotta respect people for that. Beyond that, writers that are like real published authors, I honestly don't read as much as I should. But that seems to be a complaint many people can make anymore in this modern age of ours. But one that had my fancy until he did something that I just threw me in a book was Terry Brooks, who was the author of the Sword of Shannara series. Also, I've read all the Harry Potter, so I'm a fan of J.R. Tolkien, though just the fact everyone was dying off the end is like, oh, so sad. It's like, that series matured as it went along. It's like, oh, it's so nice and kind of E-rated when it was starting, and then it's just, oh, nope, everybody's dying at the end. I'm sorry. It's just gonna happen. But, yeah, I've rambled, so I apologize.
Okay, so tell us about Past Sins.
Well, now, you see, you gotta be more specific than that, because that thing is about 200,000 words of a lot of different stuff.
Well, let's go with this then. How did you get inspired to write that? What got it going? How did you get the idea?
Past Sins actually started off as best as I can describe, an ember from another fire. I had just finished Creeping Darkness, which is my Alan Wake crossover. And in that story, at the very end, I touched on a concept of a character called Nyx once, but she was more of a plot device. In Creeping Darkness, the essence, the idea, the whatever you want to call it, Nightmare Moon, got tricked into began using the powers of the Dark Place, which is a bit of fiction canon from the Alan Wake video game that was originally on Xbox, now available on Steam and all that stuff. But as she used this power to try to get back and take over Equestria and do all that stuff, it began to eat her from the inside out. The common concept from Alan Wake's canon is that you get filled with darkness and become nothing more than a suit for it to wear, as a disguise, as a means of operating and whatnot. Nyx, in that story, in the last few chapters, became a representation in the Dark Place as the last shred of innocence of Nightmare Moon. And in the end, it was putting that innocence, that small light of goodness back in the Nightmare Moon that kind of banished the darkness and allowed things to start rolling back towards the status quo. And in that story, Nightmare Moon got somewhat of a redemption. But that idea of what would it take for Nightmare Moon to redeem herself if she had not been blasted by a rainbow was the ember that stayed with me after I finished Creeping Darkness and just continued to grow and stew in my head until I started writing Past Sins.
And you had assistance in writing this. Like, when the story even says, written by Penstroke as assisted by Batty Gloom, what was his role in the story?
Batty Gloom is generally one of my biggest writing collaborators. He's the one that will usually see my work before anyone else, and will usually tell me if I'm way off base or if I'm hitting something right on, and generally just be a sounding board for things. And he was a major support in that regard in Past Sins. He didn't really do much of the writing that I can recall, but it was kind of, he was a support being. He was the sounding board, and he was the one that eventually helped me figure out how to end the story in a particular way.
All right, so how do you take a character like Nightmare Moon, who has, give or take, 5 minutes of screen time, and develop such a personality for that character?
It's the same thing you see with people doing this stuff with background characters, is you take what you're given and try to grow from it. I mean, we've seen Ditsy Doo, Derpy Who's, whatever name you prefer for her. I'm wondering if doesn't have more screen time now in the show than Nightmare Moon does, but it's like we got a few things from her, and suddenly the fandom created, from the fandom, this uniform kind of theory of her personality kind of blossomed out. And the same could be said of a lot of characters like Lyra, Bon Bon, but Nightmare Moon is just, when she was turned back to Luna, a lot of people's fascination with her character, I felt, flowed to Luna, as it would be naturally, but it's just, then we get this season 2 episode where Luna's acting a lot different, speaking with an older English with the royal we and all that stuff, and so it creates an interesting dichotomy, but at the same time, we knew certain facts about Nightmare Moon. We knew she was jealous, we knew she wanted to bring the Eternal Night, and there was always, and there's been lots of fiction written trying to explain that, to dissect that, and Ascens is just another example of one of those where I took what was given and expanded.
And on that same note, you said that you took the idea from Nyx from Creeping Darkness, and Nyx is such a recognizable character nowadays, being that Ascens is so popular. How did that personality come about, and how did you create the character of Nyx?
Well, a bit of what she was came from Creeping Darkness, just because that was the first snapshot of her, and of course, first impressions mean a lot of things. Even to the creator, who has free will to change that as much as he or she desires. For Nyx, there's always been that trepidation, that's not the right word, the cautiousness, the fearfulness is best I can describe. That was how she was cast in Creeping Darkness, and a lot of that kind of transferred over to her in Past Sins. At the same time, it's something that fit with the situation. Something that's alluded to but not ever properly explored in Past Sins is that Nyx was in the bush where she was found. Spoiler alert for any of those listenings, but this is like the first chapter, or first or second chapter of Past Sins, so it's like seeing movie previews. She was in the bush where she was found for several hours. That was where she developed, that's where the spell completed her, and so it's like, it wasn't the best way to come into the world, to be perfectly simple about it. Dark, cold, it's the kind of situation where it just develops a certain kind of personality, a fearfulness grew out of that. And at the same time, I wanted that there's another story that came out recently called Nightmare Moon, I think, that is, Nightmare Moon came back as a filly, but she's got her Spitfire personality still, and that's the other way to go about it, and a way some people who don't particularly like Past Sins thought I should have done it, is just make her come back young, but make her come back all hateful and jealous and threatening the night. It's just, that's great for a story that's great for a story, that's a great concept, but that's not the concept I wanted to write. I wanted to have that difference, that dichotomy between what Nyx was being portrayed as, what she was as a filly, and what Nightmare was and is in the later chapters of the story. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, that was good.
So when you have a story as long as Past Sins, does the plot change over time, or does it stay pretty consistent to your original design?
You guys give me way too much credit. Past Sins didn't have a lot of pre-design work, unlike a lot, and this is something that comes down to an author's personal tastes. I've tried doing the story planning that some of the authors do. It's like, I have all these plot points planned out, and da-da-da, and when I try to write like that, it always feels like I lose interest in the story, because it's like I myself know what's going to happen, and I lose interest in writing those intermediary parts just because it's like, I want to get to this scene, but I don't want to jump to the scene and write, because if I change something, it instills in me this weird mentality that makes it harder for me to actually finish a story. But as with some of my other writings, as long as I have a fairly good concept of where I want to start and where I want to go, somehow I usually manage to a degree to figure out a good path to get from A to B. be. Maybe not always the ideal path. Maybe I could do more here, do less here, more exposition, more show, less tell. But at the same time, then it allows me to enjoy the ride of the story as well. I may not even know what's going to happen in the third chapter while I'm writing the second. It all depends where I end the second and what's going to happen and what I've set up to go on into the third chapter. For example, in Past Sins, I didn't know how I was going to end the story. I just knew the resolution that I wanted to reach.
So was it always like a planned thing that Nightmare Moon was going to be essentially a good character by the end of the story?
As I said, the original inspiration behind Past Sins, which was gained from Creeping Darkness, was the idea of a story where Nightmare Moon was able to redeem herself without getting blasted by the elements of harmony. Just because, I mean, we've seen the rainbow blast is characteristic of My Little Pony, even back to the first generation of it's the fix-all. And it's like, just hit it with the rainbow and everything will be back to better. And they on occasion, just like in this season and with the past MLP series, there's times where they subverted that. Like we've seen in the Canterlot Wedding episodes, the elements of harmony didn't even come into play, though they were like, oh, we're going to go get them. And no, we're not. We bait and switched you. And then the same kind of magical rainbow not always had the same effect in the earlier generations, but it is and always will be kind of portrayed as that fix-all. It's the ultimate weapon. It's the fix-it button. It's the thing that puts things back to normal. But when you have a story like that, it becomes a story that's about gathering the elements to do the quick fix. It becomes less about fixing the problem the long way. And I think that's what I was going for. And I'm looking at this in hindsight, but it's just, I didn't want the elements of harmony to be the solution in passing.
All right. One of the cool parts of the story is that once Nightmare Moon does come on to the scene, you go into a lot about what would happen in a world without sunlight, and how that whole thing would work. Did you do any research for that, or just think it up on the spot?
There was a little bit of research done, but at the same time, it's a lot of stuff that you kind of learn, like in high school. It's like, hey, plants need sunlight. Well, what happens when the sun's not there? Or it's also like, it's the same thing that happens, for example, on the planet Mercury, is the side that, or on Pluto or any number of planets that don't have more stable atmospheres, is the side facing the sun boils very quickly, and the side facing away chills and freezes very quickly. And though we have our atmosphere and that traps heat in for an extent, the longer the night goes on, the more heat we lose, the colder it gets. As another thing. Though, in truth, that scene, we did what research we could for that scene, because at that point it became a point of touching of Nightmare Moon thinking back and trying to remember why she was going to bring the eternal night and why she hadn't considered all these things that the children of Nightmare had thought of.
Okay, so you've been making updates to the story to keep it canon. Do you plan on keep doing that every season?
I personally don't want to do it every season. Batty Gloom is really the one pushing behind that, and I can understand his reasons behind that. And so right now, the current agreement between him and I is we're not going to touch Past Sins again until after the last season. And that's kind of the agreement between him and me, is when we've got the final confirmation that My Little Pony is over, it's done with. That may be 4, 5, 6 seasons. Some people may be hoping later after this. That's when we'll consider going back to Past Sins and maybe trying to do canonizing it. Personally, I'm of the opinion that we'll be hit with something equivalent to the atom bomb in the way of canon before that. But at the same time, that's our agreement, is let's see where this whole road goes before we try to conform to it another time. And the whole reason we actually did the Season 2 pass was, A, to agree because of the fact we thought it would be easy. That turned out such a lie, the easy. But also because of the fact that the group of people behind Equestria Publications wanted to have a season 2 version for this hardcover printing that they're doing.
That's actually the next thing I want to touch upon. What are your thoughts on this whole Past Sins print project?
I don't know. I personally think people are insane. I mean, it is cool. It is, like, so awesome. Just, I can't believe people want a hard copy of it that bad when it's free online. It's like, usually you get the thing that's the hard copy. It's like, I have to buy this online, but hey, I'm buying it in physical. But it's like, Past Sins is free online. But at the same time, it's really cool. I feel really honored that they love the story enough that they're willing to put in the time and effort to do this, and that it's turning out as successful as it is. I believe the current confirmed number of people who have been replying to the emails chains appropriately is 730, and the wait lists for books that people aren't going to actually end up paying for is over 100. And I think the Equestria Publications people are hoping to get as many people a copy of the book as they can. They've even asked me about getting some stuff set up so we can have a certificate of authenticity. It's all just really crazy, and I couldn't have imagined any of it would have come out of Past Sins when I finished that story.
All right, so you recently brought out a new side story for it. Tell us about that.
And that would be Nightmare or Nyx, and that story is actually supposed to be going to be paired with another story I'm going to try to release fairly soon. That's just kind of, it's a bit of intermission aftermath for Past Sins. It's a pair of side stories that look at Nyx's relationship with her immediate, for lack of a better term, family, Twilight and Spike, after the events of Past Sins, to kind of set the stage, set up a few facts for things that we're planning to write, I'm planning to work on and write in the future in relation to the Past Sins universe.
So this is kind of more or less a sequel to Past Sins. You know, it takes place immediately after the event.
I call it more of a side story, just because something that clicks in my head as a proper sequel is if I wrote another 200,000 word story that continued the world. It's very much as I wrote in the letter to the readers at the end of Past Sins, it's what I call a side story that's actually canon to the thing of, it's another window into the world, it's another, here's what's happening here, and maybe not a full and proper sequel, but at least a little bit more of Nyx and that world.
And did you intend to write this, or did this just kind of happen recently?
I've been intending, this one actually came out of a question from another thing, or actually, this came out of, I wasn't originally intending to write one that was focused on Spike. There was one that I'm trying to get out, waiting for a few things to come into alignment with that for Twilight and Nyx, but I wasn't thinking about doing anything for Spike. But then during the final editing for the printing, one of the editors, Illustrious Q, I think, or maybe it was Kirk, or it was one of them, brought up some interesting thoughts about Spike and how he may have viewed the events, and thus that's kind of where this idea came out of, and why, and yeah. So it's a nice pair to the Twilight Nyx story that I'm trying to get ready to get posted.
All right, so tell us about the arrangement that you have with Voz de Sueños.
It's hard to really comment on that. Voz de Sueños just is a fan of Past Sins, and he took it upon himself to try to do a recorded reading of the whole story. I gave him my blessings. I've been listening, and I love how he's developed the voices and everything else. And it's something that honors me to no end that people enjoy the story enough that they're doing all this other stuff because of it.
All right, so moving away from Past Sins, because you have lots of other stories that we can talk about as well. The first story that you wrote, or at least the first story that's posted on FinFiction at the moment, is A Drop of Moonshine.
That's actually not the first one I wrote. I want to say that was the first one after Past Sins. Yes. No. Maybe? I'm trying to remember the order. Generally, I can check Equestria Daily for the order when it gets, but yeah, let's talk about Drop of Moonshine. That's comedy. That's comedy. Still there?
Yeah, yep.
The silence.
So,
the silence.
What is that one all about?
A Drop of Moonshine, as well as that story actually has a proper sequel in A Mug of Hard Cider. But A Drop of Moonshine is basically a comedy about Princess Celestia getting drunk. And so the basic premise behind it is after Celestia, the premise is actually kind of sad, actually, when you think about it in legitimate terms. But after defeating Luna and having to banish her to the moon, Celestia fell off the wagon. She was getting drunk a lot, and generally you don't want the person, or pony per se, who's controlling the sun and moon being completely drunk off her flank most of the time, because she was trying to drown her sorrows. So Equestria as a whole enacted a sort of prohibition on itself to end the production of alcohol. And eventually, it made Celestia quit cold turkey. She cleared her head. Things were hunky-dory until Luna came back. Luna, however, one day has a very stressful day, one part of which involves trying to settle an argument between two families about an orange tree. And she just wants to relax, and she wants to have a drink. This is when Celestia tells her, well, we haven't had alcohol in 900 plus years. Luna, however, still wants her drink, thinks it's a tragedy Celestia's been sober that long, and so she makes something only she can make. She uses her magic to gather moonlight, and she distills it into a liquid that is her moonshine. And the rest of the story proceeds those two getting drunk and having shenanigans, which is it's just some crazy fun in that regard.
All right, so you mentioned there was a sequel for it. Was that planned?
Yeah, it's definitely a universe I was able to see myself getting back to at some point. The sequel is Luna is kind of put the crunch on for Celestia, kind of, you've been drinking too much, I'm not making any more moonshine unless it's a special occasion. But Celestia has gotten a taste for the beast again. She wants to be able to drink again, to relax and do that. So she starts looking for means of getting alcohol in other ways, especially after she gets Luna to agree to repeal the Prohibition Acts that have been kind of, for the most part, ignored in equestrian law. At the same time, they need to be repealed because if Luna keeps making moonshine, she's breaking the law and someone would have a fit. Or use it to usurp the throne, one of the two. So the law gets repealed, and Celestia's trying to figure out the best way to kind of reintroduce alcohol to Equestria in such a way that she doesn't completely ruin all of her little ponies. She's sensible enough that she realizes just kind of throwing this out to the wind could destroy the kingdom. So she goes first to Applejack and has her make a very special batch of cider that they're going to taste together and discuss in the winter months. This is all well and good. Everything's going as planned for the most part. The cider's ready on time. But then Rainbow Dash catches wind of the fact that Applejack has some cider left. And as we've all seen from the show, Rainbow Dash has what could be considered an unhealthy obsession with the Apple family's cider. And again, shenanigans ensue as those three end up getting far drunker than they intended, and Twilight has to clean up things again.
So, as we've seen, you've done Passings and then side stories off of that, and then Dropping Moonshine and the sequels to that. Do you enjoy expanding on your stories?
Well, it depends on the story. I mean, some are designed to be very much just single shots that stand alone and not really expanded on. My story Changing Octaves is an example. I wouldn't have a clue where to go further with, for example, Little Sugar Shop of Horrors or Bureaucracy is Magic. But there are some stories that just are better built for having these expansions, and if I want to write another story along those same lines, and that's the viable option of I'll explore this idea more instead of trying to start something completely fresh. Because in the end, people wonder, wow, this is kind of like this, isn't it? Well, yes it is, I would have to admit.
All right, another story we wanted to ask you about was Haunting Nightmare. What was the general idea behind that one?
That one was written about Halloween last year, too, and it's just, I get in the mood in Halloween, around Halloween. It's one of my favorite holidays. Back in middle school, high school, I loved to help and even help organize haunted houses, and I haven't been able to do that since I've gone to university just because I don't have the proper connections with people who have buildings and structures to set up haunted houses again. So generally what I do to get my fix is I'll write these horror stories. And Haunting Nightmare is an example of that. I was in the Halloween mood. I had watched a few horror movies, was thinking along those lines, and I had an idea. And that idea grew. And that idea kept me awake a couple nights, because it's like, I say something. Yes, that is the most horrible thing, is I am not the person that should be dealing in horror, because my imagination goes into strange gears at nights, and the shadows are not helpful.
So now, Haunting Nightmare, Rainbow Dash Presents went and had a little bit of fun with that story.
Yes, they did.
Did they have to like contact you about that and get permission to do that, or did they just kind of do that on their own?
I can't honestly remember if they asked permission or not, but I was cool with it, and I think I touched on them when I saw a preview image, and it's like I'm honored. I'm not the type to be overly protective. I mean, there's no sense in being overly protective when you're putting stuff up on the internet for free, and it's just like, oh, what am I going to do if you do something that I don't like? I'm going to glare at the screen angrily. Whoop-de-doo. So, in general, I'm very much in a very lax sort of way when people using things that are based off my thoughts and idea, and usually I'm honored. I mean, they put together this complex animatic style story with voice acting and a song and all this stuff because they liked my story, Haunting Nightmare, and that's just cool to me. And so it's a departure. It was a caricature of it, but at the same time, it's cool. It's cool.
And I'm assuming that you saw it. Then what did you think of it when you saw it?
Little sad that my crazy insane pony Third Eye didn't get in there, but that would be the only complaint I had. Is it's like, oh, they're having so much fun. It's like I can't wait to see the crazy rambling, deranged Third Eye. But then he never got in there, and I was kind of sad. I actually asked them about that after they finished the video, and they were talking to me about it. And it's like, yeah, we were going to do it, but then we kind of realized things were getting long, so we just decided to let Spike be the guy who knew how to fix everything. So it's all cool. It happens.
All right, so we talked about several of your stories so far. Is there one that you think would be your favorite?
There's always that question too. Well, you got Past Sins is arguably one of my greatest triumphs. Some people like my other stories better, but Past Sins is kind of the one that got a lot of people to know me and got a lot of people in to read my other works. And it's the highest peak of it's the highest tower where people see the light on. But I love Past Sins. I think I'm proud of how that story came out. But it depends on how you ask it. For example, I really like Little Sugar Shop of Horror just because that was a fun experiment in trying to write a piece of fiction that had a bit of a musical Broadway integrated songs style of things. And I liked Bureaucracy is Magic as well as Fluttershy Wishes because those are the stories where I was trying to stay fairly close to canon while still having that little bit of this won't happen in the show. For Fluttershy Wishes, it was near the end, things got really serious. And in Bureaucracy of Magic, I had one moment where Applejack gave a black eye to another pony, and that's like, yeah, that's not happening. This entire fiction could happen in show, except for that moment. And so they're all my stories, and I love them all to varying degrees and for varying reasons.
Now, last week, I noticed a post on EQD that said something about a heartwarming care package. This was for Kiki, and it's people writing fanfics to send to her for a Christmas present. And I noticed that you were one of the judges for that. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, it's meant to be a project where it's just kind of giving her a bunch of additional pony stories that are good-natured, good-themed, just good stories for someone in her age group of that 6 to 9 range. And it's a way for specifically fan fiction authors to give back when they may not have the funds to donate to the charities and whatnot. And it's really cool. All the stories that are submitted will be put together into an anthology book that will be sent to Kiki, and the winner of the competition will have their book illustrated into like a proper standalone book that will be included in the care package as well.
Right. So do you have I think I already know the answer to this one, but do you have anything planned for upcoming stories?
I've mentioned these already. There are a few stories that are currently kind of warehoused right now that I will be posting eventually. There's a side story to Pass-Ins that's only going to be in the print book for the first few months. And since the book's going to be supposedly released late November, that's the target, that when they'll start sending the shipments out, that means probably late January I'll release this side story that was just for that was being kept exclusive for the printing for a little while. I've mentioned I've got another side story that's kind of a brother or twin story to go with Nightmare on Nyx. That's again in the Pass-Ins universe. I'm working on a horror story right now because it's Halloween time and I get that itch in my britches to write something semi-scary to keep myself awake at night. So I was working on that earlier today. It's a couple chapters long right now, and I think I can get that hammered out hopefully before Halloween. Haunting Nightmare was supposed to be done before Halloween, and that just kind of went out the window. So here's hoping. And I've always got some ideas that I can chew on. It's just sometimes they don't pay out, or I need to step back and rethink them before I can go on further. But yeah, right now the thing that I'm working on the most is this Halloween story that is Halloween horror suspense oogie boogie story that is currently called Into the Depths. With a title like that, it's good. It sets the mood right there. Into the Depths. I'm being silly. Yeah.
So I think that's just about all the questions that we have for you. Do you have any final thoughts or shout-outs that you want to make?
Just want to always thank my pre-readers and anybody who looks at my work before it goes public because you help make it look less horrible. and help fix my grammar because grammar is not my strong suit. And shout out to Batty Gloom. He really wanted to be here for the interview. New computer that had a few lemon parts in it, and he's going through that whole song and dance and trying to get it returned. So best wishes to Batty, and I hope he's able to get things fixed so we can see him online again more regularly. And beyond that, thank you two for having me on this little interview, and I hope everyone found my answers satisfactory and don't think I'm insane now.
Well, it was a lot of fun having you on. So with that, we'll end the interview and head into the rest of the podcast.
And that was our interview with Penstroke, and that will bring us to the weather report for this week. First on the list, we have a announcement from Equestria LA. They've announced that Tara Strong and Megan McCarthy are both going to be there. They also added a little bit of a press release to their announcement, said that November 3rd, badges for November 3rd are sold out, but they do still have badges for November 4th that are available, and you can go to their website to pick one of those up. And also, if you're still looking for a room, the Anaheim Hilton is providing attendees with a limited block of rooms at a special convention rate. Only until October 11th, though, so you need to pick those up as soon as possible. And if you go to their website or call them and mention Equestria LA when you book, you can get an exclusive rate as well. So more information on that can be found in the show notes.
And next up, we have a little bit of news about the BronyCon documentary. On November 4th, they will actually be hosting a pre-release screening of the documentary at the AMC District 12 in downtown Disney. It's actually following the last day of Equestria LA that's taking place nearby at the Anaheim Convention Center. Everyone's invited, and tickets are $50 or $100 each, but they have limited to 240 total. The $50 ticket gets you admission to the screening, Q&A with some of the people, and a digital copy of the documentary. The $100 also gets you a Blu-ray copy of the documentary as well. So if you want to be one of the first to see it, and you're going to go to Equestria LA or you're just in the area, you can find more information about this in the show notes.
Next thing on the list is we have another Pinkie Pie hacking Google. Google Chrome had a contest a while back to have people hack them, therefore they could make their security better based on what the hacker did. And it was actually a guy named Pinkie Pie who won last time, and he actually won $60,000 for doing it last time. And Pinkie Pie has actually done it again as well. And he'll be taking home another big sum of money, and hopefully Chrome will be more secure because of it. And you can find out more information about that with the link in the show notes.
And next up, we have a little bit of news from bleedingcool.com about the My Little Pony comic. They've actually had pre-orders that totaled 90,100. It was completely unexpected, and I actually have a short little post about it. But just to think that the My Little Pony comic had hit over 90,000 pre-orders before it was even released. And you can see the whole little press release about this in the show notes.
Recently, the Daily Dot put out an article about the Fallout Equestria fanfic and its impact on the fandom. It went into a little bit about what the fic is, and then also talked about the author, K-Cat. And it's funny because K-Cat, if you have ever tried to contact him or her, it really, it's really hard to get a hold of K-Cat because she doesn't even have a cell phone. She pretty much said that she likes to keep her world more private. She doesn't give out any contact information in any interviews that she's ever done. Has either had her voice masked or it's the interviewer reading off her answers. So it was interesting to read about and how Fallout Equestria has become as big as it has been, with over 200 some side stories and just the different audio projects that have come out of it, including the Fallout Equestria radio drama that's now being put in production. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about Fallout Equestria, if it's something that interests you, definitely check out that article with the link in the show notes.
And that brings us to information from New York Comic Con about Season 3. They actually had a bunch of stuff come up at the New York Comic Con. Completely crazy spoilery, of course, so for about the next 2 minutes, it's going to be nothing but spoilers. Some of the information, there's a nice little bullet points here. The new villain goes by the name of King Somber. Discord is almost 100% confirmed. Luna's abandoned moon colony was joked about. History of Celestia and Luna are both coming up. Interest in visiting the Griffin Kingdom. An official soundtrack is probably on the way. More in Manhattan. All Season 3 songs from the first Comic-Con are actually from Episode 1. And Hoof Mammals can talk while others cannot. And they also released a few pictures from Twitter. You can check out all of this from the link in the show note.
And just as a side note to that, I want to make sure that people realize there was a post that was put up a couple of days ago that changed that name for the villain. It's not going to be King Somber, but instead it's King Zombra. I don't know if that really makes much of a difference, but there was a post about that to confirm that. Next thing on the list that I want to talk about is a announcement that was made by Toy Wiz. They're having a Make a Toy Wiz Pony contest. The Toy Wiz loves the My Little Pony fandom as a whole, and right now they have introduced a contest where they need people to make a pony for them. Right now, they said all you need is a Facebook page and the ability to come up with a drawing of a pony. You just pretty much send them your drawings and they'll be voted on later. But you can head over to the Toy Wiz Facebook page or check out the link in the show notes for more information. And with that, that'll bring us into the videos for the week. First up is a video that was put up by David West. He actually took it upon himself to film and release the entire New York Comic Con 2012 MLP panel. So I know a lot of you have seen the season 3 clip that they showed at that panel, but if you want to see the entire thing where they talk about all this different kind of stuff, I know that I was really interested in seeing it, so definitely check that one out. Next was a teaser that was put out for the Daring Do Adventures. For those of you that don't know, Pony in a Box Production has recently cast and is working on a Daring Do radio drama. And it's going to be called Daring Do Adventures. And they recently put out a teaser trailer for that project, and you can check that one out as well. The next video on the list is something that's been talked about for about a week now. They had a post about it, and it was something that I was really interested in seeing. It's a completely fan-made episode that centers around OC ponies. So they mention different characters from the actual show, but the cast itself is all completely OCs. This is called Dusk's Dawn. It was brought up by Project Interlude, and it has a really interesting story, but it's a little bit hard to follow. I think they tried to put a little bit too much into their first episode, but it was still really interesting, and I want to see more that's coming up as well. And they actually ended up putting a whole song into their episode too, and everyone loves the songs that the fans come up with. So that was pretty cool too. The next one is a really small video that was brought up by Balgo Bronies. This one's called Derp Push-Ups and involves Rainbow Dash and Derpy, and Rainbow Dash is training Derpy for the Hurricane Fluttershy episode, and Derpy being Derpy just kind of takes the situation and makes it ridiculous. So definitely check that out if you're interested in that. Last video on the list is yet another addition to the Licious meme that's been going on. Black Griffin recently brought out Applelicious and had a little bit of fun with the whole Applejack is best background pony joke that's been going around. But the coolest thing about it is that Big Mac is in this episode, and they actually got Peter New to do that voice. So Black Griffin's been really good about getting the cast in on this, and he had Tabitha St. Germain do a little bit of Rarity, and now he's got Peter New doing Big Mac. So it's really good, and definitely go and check that out. Those are always top quality. So that brings us to the end of the videos, and you can check all of those out with the link in the show notes.
And that brings us to the music section. First up, we have a rap track that is by I Be a Brony Rapper, Flowney, and Vinyl Scratch, titled Dodge This. Being a rap track, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. You'll just have to listen to it. Next up, we have a track titled If I Go Back by Electrocoplosion featuring Alliipster27. This is yet another Luna/Nightmare Moon track, and actually kind of her thinking, what will she do when she gets back? While she's still trapped on the moon, what will she do when she gets back to Equestria? Pretty good song, definitely worth a listen. Next up, we have a song titled simply Yay by One Trick Pony. It is, of course, a song about Fluttershy, and it's a pretty good song and pretty much describes Fluttershy pretty well, and I thought the intro was rather cute as well. And finally, that brings us to the last track, titled A Final Twilight by Matthew Mosier. This is actually an announcement for him. He's actually going to stop making music, and this is because he actually joined the Army, and he's leaving on October 21st. So, of course, he's going to go into Special Forces, and it's going to be 2 years of intense training. So who knows when he'll be able to come back to actually make music, if at all. He says there's a small chance he might be back, but we never really know. And this one actually kind of hit home with me, being a son to someone who's in the Navy for 20 years. My brother's in the Air Force. And my best friend actually joined the Army when I was still in high school, so this song actually means quite a bit to me. It's actually about Twilight having to leave her friends for something Celestia needs her to do, and it's a very good track and definitely worth a listen. You can check out links to all of these in the show notes. And now, that brings us to the casting call. Shell, on behalf of Equestrian Dubbers on YouTube, has opened up a new, yet unnamed project to cover a number of songs from Friendship and Magic. The songs so far are the theme song, Winter Wrap-Up, At the Gala, The Perfect Stallion, This Day Aria, The Ballad of the Crystal Ponies, and currently open roles are Twilight Sparkle, Applejack, Fluttershy, Rarity, Rainbow Dash, Sweetie Belle, Apple Bloom, and Scootaloo. So if you want to audition to that, check out the link in the show notes.
And that'll bring us to the fanfic segment for this week. I thought it was appropriate, this week being that we just interviewed Penstroke, to highlight his new fic that he brought out called Nightmare or Nyx. After reading Past Sins, I felt like there was some more that I wanted to hear about, especially because it didn't really get into what happened after Nyx got back. And the story itself is more focused around Spike rather than Nyx. Nyx is in it, but there's quite a bit in the middle where Spike leaves and goes off and lets things stew around in his head for a little while. So it's really heavily Spike based, and just what his thoughts on the whole situation behind Nyx, coming back after being Nightmare Moon. And it really made me excited. That Penstroke mentioned that there's another fic coming out that's going to center around Twilight and her thoughts about Nyx after becoming Nightmare Moon. And I'm really looking forward to that after reading this one. So if you want to read Nightmare or Nyx, check out the link in the show notes. I think it's definitely worth a read if you're a Past Sins fan. So with that, that'll end our podcast for this week. Tune in next week where we have our interview with Robot Butterfly. And until then, I'm Lightning.
I'm Rashi.
And we'll see you next time.
I feel that the fire. See more pain than you can know. The tears of the broken have washed away the